The unofficial title people give to the most beautiful church in Rome is always going to be up to personal preference. Some would argue for St. Peter's Basilica from the huge imposing facade, columns, and sheer volume of the building, or the monumental St. Paul outside the wall, from its golden glistening facade, mosaics, and the enormous original interior basilica design plan. Some might quote the Pantheon as the most beautiful church, but I think it is fair if we stick to the structures that was from the outset built as a Christian building. A majority who have visited all of Rome's churches would likely give this title to the Basilica of Saint Mary Major, or Santa Maria Maggiore. Aside from its Baroque facade, it is the only Paleo-Christian basilica to have kept its original appearance intact. Paleo-Christianity describes the era of the religion up to the First Council of Nicaea in AD 325. Though the current building dates to AD 432, the earliest building on the site was called the Liberian Basilica, named after Pope Liberius, whose pontificate was from 352 to 366. According to Catholic tradition, on August the 5th, AD 358, Pope Liberius had a vision of Mary in which she told him to build a church where snow would fall that same night, despite it being summer. He went to the place where the miraculous snowfall occurred and marked out the area on which the church was to be built. This building was then replaced under Pope Sixtus III, whose pontificate was from 432 to 440, by the same present structure we see today, dedicated to Mary. St. Mary Major is one of the four churches that hold the title of Major Basilica. The other three are the basilicas of St. John in Lateran, St. Peter, and St. Paul outside the walls. Amazingly, and perhaps not surprisingly, given the reverence of its dedication, the church retains the core of its original structure and part of its original Romanesque facade, which is still behind the later Baroque facade. In front of the church stands the remaining monumental column found inside the ruins of the Basilica of Constantine and Maxentius. 8 massive marble columns, standing 15 meters tall and 5.4 meters in circumference, stood at the corners inside the huge basilica. All were destroyed at some point through earthquakes, decay, or recycling, except for one which was removed by Pope Paul V in 1613, adorned by a statue of Mary and moved in front of St. Mary Major, where it still stands. Church building in Rome in the 5th century was inspired by the idea of Rome being not just at the center of the world of the Roman Empire, as it was seen in the classical period, but at the center of the Christian world. Looking at these older etchings and paintings, we see the original Romanesque facade, which in the 1740s was superseded by a Baroque facade commissioned by Pope Benedict XV. Like so many other churches in Rome, Romanesque facades were eventually replaced by Baroque ones. Thus, the overall feeling or vibe one gets when surrounded by the churches in Rome is that of a Renaissance one, a very different feel from medieval Rome before the churches updated their Romanesque facades. There are, however, churches that still retain their medieval appearance, and even an example, such as Santa Maria in Cosmedin, which in the 19th century reverted from its Baroque facade back to its Romanesque appearance. Even its interior was restored back to its 8th century appearance. Looking at this image, we see a circular window and mosaics behind the Baroque facade of St. Mary Major. That is, in fact, the top half of the former Romanesque facade, which can be found when looking at older paintings and etchings of the basilica. And so if you visit the basilica today and see the circular window and wall of mosaics behind the beautiful facade, as well as from inside the basilica, you are looking at the original Romanesque facade. In this 1599 map of the 7 pilgrimage churches of Rome, You can see all of the basilica's original Romanesque appearances before their facades were updated, aside from St. Peter's Basilica, which was built from the ground up after old St. Peter's was demolished. The structure we see today was erected immediately after the Council of Ephesus of AD 431, which proclaimed Mary as Mother of God. Pope Sixtus III built it to commemorate this decision. As you will soon see the splendor of the lavishly decorated original basilica interior, one scholar puts it that Santa Maria Maggiore so closely resembles a 2nd century Roman imperial basilica that it sometimes has been thought to have been adapted from a basilica for use as a Christian church, as its plan was based on Hellenistic principles set in stone by Vitruvius, who was a prominent civil architect and engineer at the time of Augustus, born in the 1st century BC and died in the 1st century AD. The church retains the core of its original structure, despite several additions made by later popes and the damage from earthquakes, such as the major one of 1348, which resulted in the collapse of major parts of the aforementioned Basilica of Maxentius and Constantine, and the missing part of the Colosseum's outer facade. Scholars believe the building of the basilica was influenced by seeing Mary as one who could represent the imperial Roman ideas of classical Rome, bringing together the old Rome and the new Christian Rome. The interior is very much indicative of the classical ancient Roman basilica design, something you would see in the Basilica Oppia in Trajan's Forum, for example, if it hadn't collapsed. The building is immense, and the building plan was typical for its time, with the wide and tall nave with an aisle on either side and a semicircular apse at the end of the nave. The key aspect that made St. Mary Major a cornerstone in church building then and now are arguably the mosaics, which are one of the oldest representations of the Virgin Mary in Christian late antiquity. The mosaics of the triumphal arch and nave in the church gave a model for future representations of the Virgin Mary. The influences of these mosaics are rooted in late antique Impressionism that could be seen in frescoes, manuscript paintings, and many pavement mosaics across villas in Africa, Syria, and Sicily during the 5th century. The Chapel of the Crucifix, most recently added to the church in the holy year of 1750, decorated with 10 columns made from porphyry and covered entirely in marble, is the most recent addition to the basilica. The Baptistery was originally designed as a chapel in 1605 as part of a program of additions to the basilica ordered by Pope Paul V. It was converted into a baptistery in 1825 by Pope Leo VII. The columns of the colonnade are of ancient origin, coming from the first iteration of the Marian Basilica or from ancient warehouses and pagan buildings of worship. 36 columns are made from Cipollino marble and 4 are granite, some of which were shortened to make them uniform and identical to each other. The central nave has a cosmatesque 12th century floor and a ceiling covered in gilded wood, with the first gold brought back from the New World. The authentic 5th century ancient mosaics on the arch and nave depict scenes of Christ and the Virgin Mary and scenes from the Old Testament. The goals of the mosaics as interpreted by scholars had 2 goals, one to glorify the Virgin Mary as Theotokos, the God-bearer, and the other to present a systematic and comprehensive articulation of the relationship of the Hebrew Bible and the Christian scriptures as one, in which the Hebrew Bible foreshadows Christianity. This is explained by the dual imagery of Old Testament and New Testament events depicted in the mosaics of the triumphal arch and the nave. The nave, which has mosaics representing Old Testament events such as Moses leading the Jews out of Egypt across Red Seas, offered Christians in Rome a new past, the stories of the Old Testament history, in addition to the classical Roman past. Though not as ancient as the church to which it is attached to, the Pauline Chapel, implemented by Pope Paul V, is the spiritual heart of the Basilica. In it holds perhaps what is the oldest Marian image in Rome. This is an icon of the Virgin Mary, known as the salvation of the Roman people, due to a miracle in which the icon reportedly helped keep plague from the city. It first appeared in Rome from Crete in AD 590 during the reign of Pope Saint Gregory I. According to a tradition, it was painted by Saint Luke the Evangelist using the wooden table of the Holy Family in Nazareth. The entire chapel is decorated with precious colored marble, jasper columns, and exquisite frescoes, such as the domed ceiling depicting the Mother of God being welcomed into heavenly glory. Under the high altar of the Basilica is the Crypt of the Nativity, a reliquary containing 5 pieces of sycamore wood that were part of the manger upon which the baby Jesus was laid. The reliquary which surrounds and contains the relic is made up of 70 types of marbles extracted from Rome and Ostia. Gian Lorenzo Bernini is also buried in this basilica in a humble tomb under a step to the right of the papal altar. Located behind the apse of the basilica is the Esquiline Obelisk, standing 25 meters tall and carved from a single piece of red granite of Aswan. It is of Roman origin and originally decorated the entrance to the Mausoleum of Augustus in Rome. Fallen in ruins and buried during the early Middle Ages, it was found in 1527 in 4 pieces and re-erected by Pope Sixtus V, who decided to erect an obelisk in front of every basilica in Rome to decree the victory of Christianity over paganism.